Conscious healthy aging, sustaining our reason for being, playing our part with others. So the idea, this is the kind of the culmination of conscious healthy aging. Like, why should we be healthy? Why should we sustain our reason for being? And in essence, that I see, it's to play our part with others. So, in looking at what we're doing, you could say another way of looking at our conscious flow state is, let's see if I can get rid of this here, is doing and being. So finding the balance between doing and being. So when we recognize when we're overdoing, that what it takes to catch ourselves when we're overdoing, and to catch ourselves and come back to that flow state. And then to recognize too, now being, if we're being blissed out, if we're just meditating all day long and we're kind of not playing our part, we think we're doing spiritual things, but if we're not engaged, or if we're blissing ourselves out, then we want to see too how we can get back into the flow. And then it all starts in our heart. And then we can be reviewing the compass of our heart, what really matters most, of staying in that flow zone so we can play our part with others, so we can make music together, harmony. We can say the universe, have one verse all harmonized together with all of us. So we're looking at being. And I like to look at it in terms of the turgor of being, like the being that we are. There's turgor there, and it wants to get out. It wants to express itself through doing. You can say through the doing of our feelings, of our hearts, or of our mind, of our thinking processes, of our body, of how we're acting. And then ideally is extending an integrated life-giving influence, playing our part, giving and receiving. So playing our part, our reason for being, relates to the turgor of our being, finding its way out into the world through our release points of our immediate world, of our family, our friends, our work relationships, acquaintances, etc., as well as even all the natural world. So you think about, where are our release points? Where can you act on the receptive points in your world? Who in your world is looking for a phone call or just a thought about them? Who in your world where you can actually move, I use the term, moving across the face of the waters? Where's the receptivity? And taking note of that and doing that on a daily basis, it might be, on a rhythmic basis, or an occasional basis, as well as the living world, where we can actually find release points in the living world, whether it's the animal world, the plant worlds. It's really, if we look around, there's abundant release points that are looking to find, letting our light, you can say, or letting our love move across the face of the waters to let something be filled. So blue zone. So talking about blue zone social networks are release points. So it's been known through a book called The Blue Zones by Dan Buettner that centenarians participate in social circles that support healthy lifestyles and behaviors. Blue Zones community. In Sardinia, strong family values help assure that every member of the family is cared for. People who live in strong, healthy families suffer lower rates of depression, suicide, and stress. Men in this blue zone are famous for their sardonic sense of humor. They gather in the street each afternoon to laugh with and at each other. Laughter reduces stress, which can lower one's risk of cardiovascular disease. And then spend time with like-minded friends. Those in blue zones, and again, blue zones are areas of the world where people live to be an older age and have a quality of life. So in those blue zones, they find well-being shared by sharing each other's values and supporting each other's habits. Another area of the world, Nicoian centenarians get frequent visits from neighbors. They know how to listen, laugh, and appreciate what they have. Again, these are quotes from the Blue Zones book by Dan Buettner. So you think about playing our part in community. Association with others is a fundamental essence of being. I gather you can agree with that. However, when hurts, traumas, misunderstandings, interferences come along, misunderstandings, those are interferences to our sense of belonging. So what do we do when that happens? there's a tendency to limit interactions or just go it alone. So I know in your own experience, I know in mine, that when things like that have happened, I've had a tendency to contract. But what does it take not to contract, to stay in place? So we're offering constantly an interchange with our world. So I've coined this process: conscious clearing messenger RNA process, used as needed to restore your sense of belonging. So ideally, again, we're messengers. M stands for messengers of light that needs to be received into our heart and out through our minds and bodies out into the world. Now, when things come along, when we recognize, say, even when we have health conditions, when things come along to kind of knock us off and to interfere with that sense of that light of who we are and getting out into the world, we have a choice. So we have a choice to default to patterns where we get stuck in feeling bad. You can say feeling we may feel left out, where we may get angry and cultivate hate. We might feel isolated, sickness, pain, debilitation. So we can default for those patterns when our hearts are impacted. But what do we do instead? We're deliberate. We upright ourselves and breathe. Again, as my training as a chiropractor, I recognize posture has a lot to do with feeling a sense of confidence within ourselves. And if we upright ourselves, there's a Psalm verse that I particularly love where it talks about, unto the upright, there ariseth light in the darkness. So just remember to upright yourself when you're feeling challenged. Affirming what matters. So we breathe in slow, out slow, until we can get perspective, where we can affirm what matters. And we have perspective, and we might need the allowance for forgiveness to happen. But I also look at it in terms of being large. So when something comes along, where someone may aggravate us, how large can we be, where we can actually just recognize patterns in our own self or patterns in other folks, and rather than being spun up or spiraling downwards, like not consciously healthy aging, then we're being large, which allows for conscious understanding. And when we have conscious understanding, it brings a sense of peace. And then we can return to a sense of appreciation, where we return to the place you fill with all, restoring your sense of belonging, appreciating the integrated part you play with all. Okay, so playing our part in community. Association with others is a fundamental essence of being. Knowing our sense of belonging. The currents of life that make for health and healing come through our integrated relationships with others. Okay, this is a picture of my father's, the one without the hat, right, Joe? Yes. Okay, so this little story with my dad. My dad, in his 50s, his body really, part of the reason why I became a chiropractor, because my dad's health at the time was really debilitated, even at a young age in his 50s. He had, as a kid, he had a weakness in his heart, and he developed severe kyphosis in his spine, osteoarthritis. But later in his 50s and early 60s, he was at home with my mother, and the two of them my mother really couldn't care for him, but basically the worlds had contracted. There wasn't too much interchange with the outside world, and he wouldn't have lasted longer, but eventually, my brother Joe, with his counseling work, realized that we needed to do something sooner than later. But we waited actually a year, I think, longer than we could have. But we decided, and Joe found a place for him at the Veterans Home in Paramus, New Jersey. And he went to the Veterans Home, and at first it took him about 6 months or so to get adjusted to it. But what we had heard was that the life expectancy for someone entering the Veterans Home was about 5 years. My dad lived 13 years in the Veterans Home because he had the interchange with people there. There was life currents moving, and he grew up on a block in the middle of the block in Newark, New Jersey, and his father had a grocery store. So he learned how to have a community feel way back when he was young. But when he didn't have that, basically he was dissipating and about to, lose his life there. But until he went to the Veterans Home, that really something really regalvanized, where you had interchange with the nurses or with the staff, and even with some of the others other folks in the nursing home. And because of that, something was moving with them. There's an interchange of life there. So playing our part, meditation. So we can just slow down a little bit. I get a little excited about that because I love talking about that story. I know Joe does too, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. But let's have a little meditation in terms of playing our part. So again, we'll upright ourselves. If you like to put your hands over your hearts, if you want to, you close your eyes and begin breathing in slow, and breathing out slower. Again, rhythmically, breathing in slow and breathing out slower. And as we come to a greater point of stillness, we begin to, again, acknowledge what really matters. And what really matters is the life currents that move between us. And as they move, we do feel an invigoration. We feel a sense of belonging, a sense of being in place, a sense of affirming our part with each other. And as we do, our feet are on the ground and our mind is open and our hearts are open for how even, you can say, greater works can be done through ourselves. As we breathe accordingly, breathing in slow and breathing out slower, we come to rest in the being that we are, really in the one being that we are all together. And as we acknowledge our beingness as one being, we give thanks for being present here and now, in form, here on earth. Breathing in slow and breathing out slower. Giving thanks for our life force and giving thanks for the opportunities we have to extend our life force, interchanging with others. For here is our reason for being. Here is the makings of newness, freshness, and life. As we breathe in slow and breathe out slower. Breathing in slow and out slower. As we affirm our reason for being, we pause. We pause. We may pause at times just to be open. As we pause now, let's continue on in this light. Okay, we can open our eyes and let's look at this next slide. So again, tonight, we've gone through all these steps. And now take a moment. Let's take a moment. How will I increase my sense of community, playing my part? So let's take a little time on our own to consider that. It'd be good to, if you have pen and pencil, to write something down. Good. Are you good? Okay, so let's review playing our part.